Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, January 29th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. It is Pitcher Week, episode 1 of 4, focusing on pitching. The first 3 episodes this week all focused on starting pitchers. The 4th episode will focus on relievers. And I'm guessing there will be some kind of 5th episode outside of this week that kind of digs through all the pitchers we still didn't have room for, even though we're going to talk about them throughout the entire week. So
you probably have like a deep hitters and deep pitchers episodes.
Yep.
Although we did get some feedback that, some of this stuff is too deep for our listeners. So
hey, it's still fun. I mean, you got to walk the dog, got to deal with the winter somehow. So
you're also like a fan of a regular team, probably. So at some point, us talking about, some deep sleeper on your regular team is interesting. So
it's got something to do with Joey Loperfido, but lots of ground to cover here today. We've continued to use the NFBC ADPs to set up where players have been going in drafts, so everything is tiered based off of that. We're going to go through probably about 30 or so starting pitchers today, time permitting. I think we can get it done. Eno's got starting pitcher rankings up on the site with a much upgraded visual display for those, so be sure to check those out if you're a subscriber to The Athletic. If you don't have a subscription, $2 a month gets you in the door at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. The rankings look fantastic in the new format, so I'm excited.
You. I think thanks to the engineering squad, Mark Mazzoni and Amy Cavanaugh, like they did a really good job with it. And I thought that the addition of 75 player caps would be kind of a fun thing this year, just to point to the certain aspects of a pitcher's profile that I find most salient, so that we had some color coding, so you can be like, oh, white is bad and green is good, if you're looking at the stats, but having a little blurb there also helps point to like, this is why he's not higher, this is why he's lower, whatever.
It's playing defense against the questions for the comment section. Well, we get the pod too. That can add some color to the analysis as well. If you need more than red and green, if you need shades of green, shades of red, yellow, orange, whatever colors you need to get the analysis done, we have that here. So we begin where we always begin, at the very top of the board, tier 1 by ADP. Spencer Steer, really the consistent only first round pitcher, going kind of in the middle part of round 1 right now. Garrett Cole goes in the first round many times, but not every single draft. We've got Corbin Burns, Zack Wheeler, Kevin Gausman, and Luis Castillo just barely makes the cut, just a little outside the top 30, but there's a little bit of a mini break before you get to the next cluster of pitchers in tier 2. So I decided to expand this to a group of 6. Now, Spencer Strider handled those extra innings last season with little difficulty and probably deserved a little better, maybe a lot better on the ERA front. He had a strikeout rate that once again would have been very good for a closer at 36.8%. We know he does it mostly with 2 pitches, an amazing fastball and an amazing slider. We've talked on this show about how he can get away with missing middle because the fastball is just that good. It's a great luxury to have. So I think the big question with Strider is, what's the optimal setup for you to want to take him in the first round? Like, who's off the board already among hitters? What type of league is it? When do you like Strider where he goes?
I actually, mid round where he actually goes is fine with me. I think there's like a pretty clear top 5-ish. What's the top 5 ADP? We've got Acuna, Julio Rodriguez, Corbin Carroll. They're in the top 3, right?
Witt and Betts. Yeah. It's like those 5 hitters pretty consistently go in the first 5 in some order. And then you start to see Strider usually jump around pick 6. His earliest pick in the last 7 days is pick 6.
And I think that's fine, because after that, what are your batters? You got Jose Ramirez, who's getting older. You've got Shohei Ohtani, who's not a pitcher, and you don't know how that's going to affect him. Freddie Freeman, who, he's older, I guess. I mean, there's just, they're still first rounders, so I'm not going to come up with like he sucks. But, there's a little bit more questions, I think, about bats in the latter half of the first round, which is personally why I want to draft in the top 5. So I probably won't get Strider, but if the next draft pumps out, a 7 or 8 pick for me and Strider's there for me, I think I could do it, because the second round bats are good. And Strider, projects to be by and away the best fantasy pitcher this year. And one of the things we did this year, I talked about it here on the pod, and I just thought it was good to put it down on paper. We have their season stats for the last 3 years, so their innings and then their earned value rank. So basically, where did they end? We talk about all these things. We talk about components and results and all this stuff. Well, I just thought it was really instructive to see that Spencer Strider was the third best pitcher in fantasy baseball last year. So whatever you think of his flaws or this or that, or that ERA was so unsightly or whatever, he was the third best. And most of the kind of traditional markers say that he could be better, in terms of his batting average on balls in play, or his home runs per fly ball that was a little bit inflated. His Sierra, as an example, was 2.86, best stuff plus in, among starting pitchers. So I think there's also the possibility that the changeup gets a little better, and he starts to, really have a third pitch. But even if he just did what he did last year, he was the third best.
Yeah, really nice projections on Strider everywhere you look. And when you kind of take a step back, you look at the last 2 seasons combined and see how this group stacks up against one another. That K percentage, 37.4%, or is even better in 2022 for Strider. It stands out even among the elite starting pitchers. Doesn't really have any sort of home run issue. You see the ERA, if you're watching on YouTube, 336, just a hair higher than everybody else in this group. You're talking about a tenth of a run higher than the likes of Gausman, Wheeler. The whip's right on par with all these guys, and those ERA indicators are better. Also got Stuff Plus and Pitching Plus on the screen. He's best by Pitching Plus, right? He's best by Stuff Plus. Everything looks real, real good with Spencer Strider. So not a lot of controversy, I think, for most people putting him atop the rankings. Again, Gerrit Cole is a little bit trickier. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago because we had a listener question about this amazing season he just had, still having a few warts, most specifically the K's starting to fade a little bit. Is it the beginning of a slow decline for Gerrit Cole, or is it just a little bump in the road and we're still going to see some seasons where he's striking out more than 30% of the batters he faces?
Yeah, I mean, you do have a full mile per hour loss on the fastball. It's still 96.8, so he's great, but that is the kind of aging on the fastball you start to expect in the 30s. So I'm sort of fascinated to see what his velo will be like this year. There were some pitch mix situations where, he did up his curveball usage and his cutter usage, and that may have helped him keep the home runs down. But it also may have contributed to his worst strikeout rate since he kind of became who he is in Houston in 2018. So a 27% strikeout rate, he's been above 30 for 5 straight years. And so that was enough for me that I actually put Burns second. And just because I think that they're both really, really excellent. And if you look at earned value, they are maybe the highest floor pitchers in the game. And I think you can't argue with their ceiling because they're Cy Young type ceilings. So you combine guys who have finished basically on average in the top 10, sometimes 13, sometimes 5, sometimes, 1. But both of these guys are top 10 guys for the last 3 years. And so you're kind of picking the nits. I think they're very that they're worthy guys, even in the first round, but Burns goes in the second. So I love getting Burns in the second round is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, easily the third pitcher off the board by ADP right now. Had a reverse split in 2023, which is weird. He's never had that before. Was excellent
with a great
against
cutter
lefties.
Like that, you wouldn't think that he would.
Yeah, it was like almost a 60-point difference in WOBA. I think that's just noise. The thing that I think is encouraging about Burns as well, the stuff didn't really look like it took a step back, even when things weren't going really well for him in the first half relative to the stratosphere sort of expectations. He had a 20.7 K minus BB percentage in the second half. He just looked like himself from July on again. And I think you look at the way he's set up going into a walk year. If the Brewers aren't contending for a playoff spot, he's a big trade chip, goes to a contender, ends up on a good team. If the Brewers are good, then he's on a good team and he's still in a familiar environment. So the skills look really solid across the board still for Corbin Burns. I think that kind of early to mid second round price tag is very fair just based on the consistency he's shown us now over the last 3 seasons.
Yeah, and even the velo was down about a half tick on the season, but if you look at velocity graphs for Corbin Burns, it was a little bit more erratic early in the season, and then he just really settled in with his velocity. So I think that he just had sort of a bump in the road early on in the season. Maybe he had to adjust a slightly lower velo, but if this was the adjustment, I'll take it. I mean, looking at his player card in terms of earned value, he was 4th in 2021, 10th in 2022, and 13th in 2023. That's really solid work.
Yeah, love that consistency. Back half of this group, Zack Wheeler goes right around Burns. Sometimes he goes ahead of Burns as well. And when you look at Wheeler, you see, near elite whips that sort of offset a slightly boosted ERA, again, relative to the group. Home park likely a factor there, of course, in Philadelphia. I think the K percentage is just a tick below some of the other SP1s that you're going to see off the board. But Wheeler has just been a machine over the 3 full seasons he has pitched in Philly. One of the better free agent signings of the last 20 years among pitchers in terms of how much he's delivered for them on that long-term contract. And you were pointing out before the show, there were some changes with the sweeper that Zack Wheeler was throwing. He was getting more movement as the season went along.
I mean, I think this is pretty dramatic for the course of one season. 10 is kind of where you start to define a sweeper. I think literally StatCast defines a sweeper as having 10 plus inches of sweep. And that's where, if you're looking on YouTube, you can see Zack Wheeler started the season with 10 inches of sweep. He ended the season with 16 inches of sweep. I mean, that is a dramatic difference. And it wasn't just all at once. He kind of dialed it in over time. And if you saw him in the playoffs, you saw that sweeper, and that was the best version of it. So, this to me provides a little bit of upside on the strikeout rate front. He's, I think, a real success story for somebody who has just a great fastball and over time has found the secondary pieces to match that fastball. But I think one of the reasons he's had these great outcomes, I don't know that people realize this, he has pretty good command, like really good command. And, so I think that allowed him to, first of all, function when he didn't have a fully developed arsenal, but also maybe made him more likely to develop that bigger arsenal, because he had that touch and that feel. So now he's throwing 3 breaking balls, and that big fastball. And there's only one problem I have. We've got health grades on him from Jeff Zimmerman, and they were based on the inputs are how old a pitcher is, how many days they've been on an injury list in the past 2 seasons, how many days they've been on the injury list in their career, and their fastball velocity. And if you add all that together for Zack Wheeler, he actually gets an F. He has spent 490 days on the injury list in his career, 30 over the past 2 seasons. He's had 6 significant arm injuries, and he throws hard.
Well, you rained on that parade pretty quick, but I think it.
I mean, there's a lot of there's other people. There's going to be so much injury risk. I mean, and we're not very good at predicting it. So, and maybe he's turned the corner. I mean, he's seemingly been pretty healthy recently. 30 days with the last 2 years is not that bad.
Right. So what I did, it's not going to be on the screen because I just added it because I was curious. I put the tier 1 and tier 2 pitchers on a leaderboard together and just sorted by innings. And Wheeler is 8th among 12 pitchers in innings. The guys that are behind him, Kirby, who didn't debut until I think after the 2022 season started, so he didn't even get a full season in the big leagues.
8th among the top 12 in innings. So not
8th among the top 12 in ADP. So this is it's not great. So everybody in this tier is ahead of him except for Strider, who's only 2 innings behind. His role,
just a baby man.
His role was managed carefully in 22, so you can't really make that as a fair comparison. Kirby debuted in 22, and the 2 guys out of tier 2, Tarik Skubal and Tyler Glasnow, have missed a ton of time with actual active injuries. So I kind of understand where that negative health grade comes from, but I do think there's some questions that come up when we start talking about pitcher health grades and say, how far back into the past do we really want to go when we're modeling these things? Can you shed the durability label? Can you at least move from an F to a C if you have 2 full consecutive healthy seasons or even 3 full consecutive healthy seasons? Because I do think like Pablo López. We're
Yeah, that's the name I was going to say.
I had year over year, I had massive injury concerns about him, and I don't think they've gone away completely. But I don't worry as much now as I used to because we've seen it. We've seen 374 innings over the last 2 seasons from López. So now he sort of stacks up more favorably to some of the guys, even in this tier from a workload perspective, whereas 2 years ago, that would have been impossible.
Yeah. So I also think that like this type of research is set against a sort of vastly changing background of player development and what sorts of things they're doing biomechanically to keep people healthy, and how they're cleaning up things. And it's like when we look at one of the big ones is when we look at returners from second Tommy John surgery. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. I won't say his name. I won't break the rundown. But if you look at returners from second Tommy John surgery, there's a lot of people there whose careers were ended. But those were like 5-10 years back, and you just don't know how relevant it is that some of these guys like Chris Medlin, how relevant is Chris Medlin to Walker Buehler? Like I can't figure that out. Oops, I said his name. Sorry.
It's okay.
He's tomorrow, probably.
It all doesn't have to follow a perfect order. It's just, the flow of the conversation needs some sort of direction. Well, we've also got Gausman and Castillo in this tier. And Gausman's kind of interesting because I think skills hold up just fine. He's had this elevated whip the last 2 seasons, which I think is something that's happened to him on balls in play specifically, right? Because the K rate's good, the walk rate's good. And I wonder if it's like the defense behind him in Toronto, the infield defense more specifically, if that's been a problem, or if it's harder contact or some combination of both. But that's one of those things that's like the inverse of Wheeler. We looked at Wheeler and said the whip's great, the ERA is a little off compared to the whip. Gausman is the opposite. ERA is really good, but the whip's actually kind of inflated for a top-end pitcher.
Yeah, and there's a stat over at Pitcher List that tries to capture some of that, contact and appraise the contact that a pitcher gives up. And it's a little bit worried that some of this is earned by Kevin Gausman. Mm-hmm. And, one thing that you do see over time is that, a pitcher, so for his career is a 315 BABIP. That's higher than usual. And there is some stickiness to it, especially since you consider he's thrown 1,500 innings. Mm-hmm. Like we can probably trust some of these trends on the 1,500 level, and so, yes, I think he gives up hard contact. I would guess it has something to do with being largely a 2-pitch pitcher when it comes to, either getting strikes or getting swinging strikes, called strikes or swing strikes. Basically, it's fastball and splitter. He can sneak in some stuff with the breaking balls, but they've never been good. And so that's why for me, I was really like trying to figure out where to put Gausman. And I didn't put him in my top 5 just because I think he earned some of this contact. He is a 2-pitch pitcher. I know it's really worked for a while, but there is a flaw there. And I just wonder, as the aging comes on the fastball, and it's starting to a little bit, what happens when he drops to 93.5 or whatever, something like a 93.6, 93.7 could be possible this year. That's like pretty close to league average all of a sudden, which is crazy to me. And so I just wonder if people are going to keep swinging at that splitter as the fastball velo goes down.
Yeah, fair question. And he's a guy that I'm not avoiding, but I think I'm always doing something a little bit different when I see Gausman versus some of the bats that go kind of in this late round 2, maybe early round 3 sort of range. Luis Castillo is the last one of this group by ADP. I think you've also got him just a tick below market. You could easily end up with him based on where you've got him ranked. You've got him 7th among starting pitchers. He gets drafted 6th. I think if you take very good skills, you put him in a great park for pitchers, this is generally what you're going to get. Might have been a little unlucky with homers last year. That's something that I'm looking at compared to his previous career norms. He did pretty well at Great American Ballpark when he was a Red. Other interesting thing for me with Castillo, he relies less on that changeup now than he did in the past. It's still a 4-pitch mix, but he throws that more like 15% of the time instead of making that his primary pitch to get swinging strikes.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing in the end, is that basically I see that there's two Luis Castillos shoved into the body of one, which I wouldn't try at home, but you still got the kind of sink or change guy that he was with the Reds. He can go to that. If there's a certain lineup, day, park, whatever situation he's in that he can't find the slider that day, he can still go to that, and it's a good pitcher. The better pitcher is kind of this four-seam slider guy that mixes in the sinker and change, and so we've seen him take a leap forward. The one thing that was just interesting to me was when I was looking at 2022, where a lot of the same things are true that were true last year, except he threw 150 innings. He was the 34th best pitcher that year. And it's just kind of amazing how, and I guess it might have something to do with a little bit of a lower K rate. Like the 50 innings maybe mean more to him than to somebody else, I don't know if that's true or if I'm saying it right, but like if he's at 180 innings this season, I think, top 10 easily. But we have a use case where it's like pretty much the same guy that if it's 150 innings, he's top 30. Now that's an okay floor, but you start to see the floor on Corbin Burns and Gerrit Cole was like 10, 14. So there's a little bit of difference for me there. And I think it's related to that lower strikeout rate compared to his peers.
Yeah, and there are two guys I like a little better than Castillo that go in tier 2. So that's the other part of the equation for me, is sometimes waiting around a little bit longer and grabbing one of those two pitchers, or just jumping one of those up instead because they're my straight up preference. So we'll talk about those guys here in just a moment. I think the other thing with Castillo's value in 2022, he won 8 games. It was 150 innings, so he lost innings, so that hurt him. Mm-hmm. 8 wins is also pretty low, even for missing that first month or so of the season. So just highlights the value of that. Wins are stupid. Yeah, if you ran that calculator with innings pitched, he'd probably pop up, I don't know, 10, 15 spots at least. Yeah. It'd be a pretty significant jump. So keep that in mind too. You can see a lot of fluctuations in your annual value just based on having some good or bad luck in that wins department. Let's move on to tier 2. This is a fun group. Pablo López, Zack Gallen, George Kirby, Tyler Glasnow, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Nola, and Tarik Skubal. I was really happy I could fit all 7 names onto one screen here for our YouTube viewers. I'm going to give you a couple guesses at who I like out of this group more than the back end of tier 1.
George Kirby and Pablo López. No, sorry. George Kirby and Yamamoto.
You got one of them right.
Yamamoto.
I like Yamamoto quite a bit, but the one I like the most of this group is Tyler Glasnow.
Oh, Glasnow. I should have.
You should have known.
Sorry, I transposed me onto you. I have Kirby 4th. So
yeah, so there's a lot going on here. Like Pablo López, for me, like I could see myself drafting him if he was the last one available, with maybe the exceptions of Nola and Skubal. And we'll kind of get to why in just a couple of minutes. But I think from a skills perspective and a workload perspective, if I'm going to take the injury risk, I'd rather take the injury risk on Glasnow, because I see clear and obvious ace stuff. Like there is just top of the shelf, tons of strikeouts, elite ratios potential with Glasnow. The question is always innings. So if I'm shopping in this bin, I want the what could go the most right of the group. And I think it's Glasnow, even over Kirby. Whereas I think Kirby gives you that room for growth. I think his ceiling is still lower compared to Glasnow. And I think everybody loves Kirby right now. I think there's extra buzz on him. I think if you're in an auction situation, it's going to cost you extra dollars, because he seems like everybody's, relatively speaking, everybody's preferred. Let me grab one of these guys from tier 2 and push him up towards that end of round 2, beginning of round 3 turn, because he's got command and good stuff and has the park. Like, we love George Kirby for good reason. It just seems like he's becoming really trendy.
I would actually get a little bit nervous if Kirby goes into the second round, because the reason I love Kirby so much and why I have him where I have him is I actually have fewer question marks for him than Kevin Gausman and Luis Castillo. Like, you don't really have a health question. You don't have a command question. You don't have a size of arsenal question. You don't really have a stuff question now that he's kind of built out his arsenal the way he has. So I really don't have any questions. Maybe the strikeout rate, again, is lower than his peers, but I think he's going to undo that by having a lot of volume. What I love, the best case scenario for me is taking Kirby in the 3rd round after you have 2 bats. I think I kind of love that. If he starts going in the 2nd round, it puts a little pressure on that strikeout rate to improve, which it did a little bit. Kirby started throwing a splitter in the 2nd half. His strikeout rate was a little bit better. So there's some room for improvement there. Yamamoto, to me, is similar to Kirby. I know he hasn't pitched in the major leagues, but in terms of like command, stuff, arsenal, innings, age, like it's all lined up pretty well. Just demonstrated results could make you nervous. I get that. Glasnow, to me, the eye-opening thing was that, that we have that, I have that earned value up there, right? In 2021, he had 88 innings. He was the 32nd best starting pitcher with 88 innings. Like that sort of turned the light on for me. I had Glasnow a little bit lower just because there's a lot of injury risk, and I was trying to mitigate my injury risk, and I find that I'm always trying to buy innings in my drafts, and he's not going to give you innings. 2023, 120 innings, 24th best pitcher. So, the floor seems like it's in the 20s, which is better than I think what people think. I think they think, oh, he's just not going to pitch, and so he's just not going to be valuable. Well, no, actually, he's probably going to be like a top 25 pitcher, even if he only throws 100 innings this year. And then there's just the chance that he throws 140 and is like a top 3 pitcher in baseball.
Right. And if somehow he throws 160 or 170, which is not out of the question. I think he's done it before.
He could have a Strider. He could have a Strider year.
There you go. You get a guy that can make a run at the best pitcher on the board. So that's why I do it. That's why I take the chance. I think the important thing to point out would be if Glasnow is your first pitcher compared to Kirby, I think you do have a slightly different approach with how you follow them up. I think you have to be a little more urgent in following up and making sure you
might want to double tap pitchers.
Yeah, or you at least skew more durable with a lot of your other subsequent pitcher selections, right? I don't want to build a whole team full of health grade F pitchers. Like I like taking chances and trying to hit the max possible outcome, but at the same time, I need guys that actually are going to pitch. So I don't want to overdo it with the injury risk.
There's a guy I have in this tier for myself that's not in the ADP tier that you could possibly double tap with him, which would be kind of brilliant and amazing. Logan Webb plus Tyler Glasnow would be the best sort of sandwich. You might actually get two top 10 pitchers out of it and like 300 innings, 350 innings. So, there are some pitchers that are there. I think some people might argue that Aaron Nola is that type too, with the high innings pitched. I was a little disappointed when I saw Aaron Nola's earned value over the last 3 years. 58th in 2021, 18th in 2022, the good year, and 51st. I mean, I ended up ranking him 18th because I was like, that's the best he's done, and we're asking him to bounce back. Like, is there really an argument that you can make that he's going to be better than he was in 2022?
I think it's hard to. The K percentage maybe comes back a little bit, but I don't know. He's 31 years old. Should we really expect that to happen?
In front of the same park, in front of the same defense, it's like there's not like a lot to like point to.
Yeah,
same pitching coach. It's like.
Yeah, I think you're just paying for some of the past peaks, and it's hard to know for sure if he still has that same ceiling, even though you're going to get innings. It's a good team. There's a nice floor there. It feels like you're drafting a ton of floor if you take Nola. And it's so funny that Tarik Skubal's the guy that goes right after him, because Skubal comes back and throws just 80 in the third elite innings coming off another arm injury. He's always had ridiculous strikeout rates in the minors, and now he's starting to show above average control, which I didn't think was part of the package with Tarik Skubal. And he's got a home park that suppresses homers. So in addition to his own skills, his own stuff, all of this comes down to a similar sort of Glasnowian sort of problem where the previous high water innings mark was 149 and a third. And that's even lower than some of what Glasnow did earlier in his career when you combine some of his AAA and big league workloads from those early years of Glasnow. So this looks like a really good combination of skills with that sort of heightened risk. So kind of getting back to what I was saying before, I wouldn't take Glasnow and Skubal back to back. Like, I don't know if you want to take both of those guys on the same roster. I think that's a very high ceiling, but also very risky sort of combination. But I'm intrigued that Skubal's going this early because I believe in the skills, but I have just as many questions about his innings as I do about Glasnow's.
Steamer has him projected as the third best pitcher in baseball.
Yeah. I think that's fueled this ADP a little bit because Steamer was the first publicly available projection set.
So you've got a 334 projection, ERA projection, 1.14 WHIP, 28% strikeout rate. Steamer's basically the high watermark on all of those. Mm-hmm. You know, here's an example of one that's totally different. Zips, 3.65 ERA, 25% strikeout rate. So there's a big gulf there between the two. The pitching plus projections have a 3.64 ERA and a 25.6% strikeout rate. They kind of line up a little bit better with Zips on him. There is a little minor wrinkle. We ran a Stuff Plus update that's in these rankings, and we added platoon splits because lefties were actually being sort of unfairly shorted by Stuff Plus. And so putting in the sort of handedness of the pitcher helped improve the Stuff Plus of pitchers. But Skubal's fastball, even though he got it up to nice velo last year at 96, it doesn't have great shape. With the update, we got his fastball went up to 99 Stuff Plus. So I would just say that, like, Stuff Plus doesn't love him. Maybe it's missing something. But if I add Stuff Plus doesn't love you, plus I think your health grade is shakier than most people think. It's just that's not enough. I can't put you in my top 10, you know. And so he sits next to guys that I think have other question marks. Like for me right now, he's right next to Freddy Peralta. Why wouldn't I take Freddy Peralta? I feel like, you know, I really believe in the stuff with Freddy Peralta. The strikeout rate should be better for Freddy Peralta. And if they're both innings risks, then let me just take Freddy.
Yeah, we've seen a little more from Freddy, just a little bit more. And I think that could be one separator too, if you're trying to decide which way to go. And it's interesting, Freddy leads off the next tier, so there's not that much that actually separates them ADP wise. It could be a legitimate toss up you have to consider as you build out your rotation. With Lopez and Gallen, I feel like we're kind of sidestepping the two guys that go first in the group. Is there anything about either one of them that gives you pause or makes you feel like they're okay values where they go? I just don't feel like I like them as much as either one of Glasnow, Yamamoto, or even Kirby. So I'm constantly pushing guys ahead of them and then giving myself an out by just taking a hitter or something else when I see Lopez or Gallen atop the queue.
Let me see here. I think I, in fact, texted Jordan Rosenblum, who helped us do the pitching plus projections, because I said that, what's going on with the Gallen projection? Because he's projected by PPERA to have a 3.98 ERA. And him and Lopez both 3.9. That's next to Gilbert or Snell. Gilbert 3.4, Snell 3.6, Peralta 3.79. So like, what's going on with that? I guess what happened was he is in this first run of the PPERA projections. He used the last 6 weeks of Stuff Plus, and so it's post All-Star break Stuff Plus. In the last 6 weeks of the season, he was 100 Stuff Plus. I think there is something a little bit on edge for me with Gallen, and it has something to do with, like, you know, how he was as a pro, how he's thought of as a prospect before he had like a little velo boost. And what I'm just worried about is what happens to how we think of him once that velo boost subsides. You know what I mean? Like, he's 28, he's not super old, but at 93.5, that velo, like, what happens if it's 92.8? You know, that's kind of getting to be below average, especially for a right-hander. So I just feel like he has good stuff, but it's kind of on the precipice. It's, what happens with a half tick or a full tick lost, I'm not sure. So that's how I understand it. Like a kind of a little gentle decline in stuff in the second half made me a little bit worried.
So with Lopez, we saw an uptick in fastball velocity. He was 94.8. That was a career best for him last year. So do you think he can reasonably hold that? Because I would have had the same concern about Lopez entering last year. That there's just not enough room velo-wise for him. And instead, he goes the other direction and pushes things up a little bit.
Yeah, I have Lopez one ahead of Gallen. And I just think I liked those indicators. I like the fastball velocity indicator. I also like that all this stuff happened with a new team. So they kind of give him a sweeper. They clean up his mechanics. His velo goes up. Like it's a sort of intoxicating narrative for me, right? It's the power of coaching. Like Pablo Lopez made better through the power of coaching. I love it. The only question for me with Pablo was the health grade, which has not really been a question for Gallen, which is weird. He gets an A on Jeff Zimmerman's card despite having a partial tear of, his flexor muscle or something, like, or is it even his UCL? But it's like not where people normally get it because he got it from batting. But there's a fairly significant injury in there for Gallen, and it's kind of recent, whereas Pablo Lopez's injuries are more in the back, in the rear view mirror.
Yeah, I see that as a reason to prefer Lopez over Gallen as well. But again, taking Kirby, definitely taking Glasnow ahead of everybody else in this group. And Yamamoto, here's the thing about Yamamoto. You wrote about the arsenal before he signed with the Dodgers. It's like a better version of Kevin Gausman, right? Like, walk us once again through the arsenal that Yamamoto has and why he should be so good right away against big league hitters.
Yeah, it's like a two-plane fastball that like the one that Kevin Gausman has, but it's also released sort of like 5 inches, 4 inches lower. So the appraisal will be to that it's like a legitimate sort of ride and fade kind of fastball, real legitimate two-plane fastball with good velo and really good command. So I just use Gausman because the Yamamoto splitter could potentially be the best splitter in baseball the minute he lands. And, and that's what we see in terms of movement. We looked at the WBC where he was using an American Rawlings ball. And so we could look at the movement profile of it, and it profiles as one of the best splitters in baseball. So there's your natural Gausman package. Except then on top of that, you add what looks to be elite curveball. I want the comp for me is like almost Adam Wainwright, but I didn't want to put that in there because then people would be like Adam Wainwright, the toast version. No, I mean like I think he has like one of those big hammers, the Max Fried Adam Wainwright type of really big hammer. It's not like 85 and sizzling. It's more of a like I thought it was some other pitch, and now I'm getting this huge curveball. Kevin Gausman never had an elite breaking ball. So just the idea that you might have someone that's Gausman-esque, but also has an elite breaking ball. And then the last bit, which I just think is kind of fascinating, and this is maybe faith casting, but he's never thrown a great slider. And that's weird because he's shown the ability to spin the curveball. I mean, he's going to LA. They can't find him a good slider. So I feel like there's a real potential for like a 4-pitch, like really amazing mix. And I also just feel validated by the contract he got, right?
Oh yeah.
Like that analysis lines up with the contract he got.
And I think we're talking about a guy that's shown pretty good durability in Japan too. The last 3 seasons going back to 21, 193 2/3, 193 even, 171 plus the WBC innings. I mean, there's a lot to like here. We've talked about the home run rate being just absurdly low. I'm curious to see how well that translates.
Yeah, it's not going to translate. I mean, it's like a 0.
It's basically
like a 0.1 or something. Like, I don't know. I mean, nobody has a 0.1 in America.
Yeah, it's a career 0.4 homers per 9 in NPB, which is
right.
Nuts
also doesn't really happen here.
897 innings. So all of that is to say, like, I fully buy into Yamamoto. I know there's some people that say, I just want to see it first. That's fine. You can wait and you can hold off for a year. I'm in right away. I think he belongs, and he's among the preferred trio for me out of this tier. Plenty of good pitchers to choose from in this bunch.
I've got a pitcher who's not listed on this one and wasn't listed on the last one, but I prefer over guys. There he is. Well, we can wait. But I want to talk about him where I have him.
Good.
So, Logan Gilbert is a tier 3 pitcher by ADP. When we reran Stuff Plus, he popped, and that makes the new Stuff Plus number makes so much more sense to me. So he's got a 116 Stuff Plus now, and he's got an A for health, which I believe. I think he's going to give you a lot of innings. The strikeout rate isn't quite that 30% level, but his projected strikeout rate is 26.5. So, there's a lot going on there that I really like. And I think I have, if you're looking at the screen right now, you're looking at his pitch velo. And the reason I chose this is he's kept his velo. It gets better over the course of the season when it comes to the fastball. So you're not looking at somebody like a Gallen who, comes into the season at 94, but starts losing velo over the course of the season. This is a stud that throws 96 all the time and just gets better as the season goes on. You can also see in the slider velo that he used to throw a sweeper, and then he threw kind of a baby slider, and now he throws a gyro slider. He throws the hardest version of the slider that he's had. I think he's really, dialed that in to the point where he's got a really strong 2-pitch mix. He's got the most extension in baseball, meaning that he's releasing the ball close to the plate, so it really jumps on people. And then he's been adding in a splitter that has been working for him. So, that's a good 3-pitch mix. Even the curveball, it goes in and out. It's not as good as it used to be when he was a prospect, or at least it's not as good as people thought it would be. But that's a really good mix. Like, we're talking about Yamamoto, right? This is a 4-pitch mix, and he has pretty good command. So it's like, this is, if you want demonstrated, outcomes in baseball with some upside, I think Logan Gilbert is your guy.
Yeah, tons of innings too. 185 and 2/3 back in 2022, 190 and 2/3 last season. So yeah, it's like A for durability.
16th best starting pitcher last year.
Yeah, really, really solid, and gets drafted, I think, even a little after the 16th pitcher, or right around that mark. So you're not even paying up for someone who could still be getting better. This group begins with Freddy, Peralta, Framber, Valdez, Max Fried, Logan, Webb. Blake Snell is part of this cluster as well. Kodai, Senga, Grayson, Rodriguez, and Logan Gilbert's actually the last of the tier. Kind of spans from the pick 60 to 75 range. They're clustered tightly together here, so that's why we've got so many names in such a small window. But this is pretty much where most people are shopping for their second starting pitcher, unless they're employing a really aggressive, heavy yellow brick road strategy, as I like to call it, where you're just going pitcher, 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 pitcher. I think Dalton Del Don of Yahoo is probably the most extreme example of someone who's been doing that a lot the last couple of years. But it almost sounds like in some ways Gilbert for you could sneak into the top 10 based on stuff and skills and workload. Like there's reason to believe he could actually pop like a low end SP1 this year.
Yeah. And he's another guy in Webb and Gilbert that I think are great pairings with Glasnow. If you're going to do like a 2 aces thing, or if you're trying to do something at the top where you're investing in the best pitchers, I think that's a good way. Gilbert or Webb as the innings horse with some upside. If Webb adds the slider that he had a couple of years ago, if he figures out that slider, he could have a better strikeout rate. He has a big innings and park situation floor. Same thing with Gilbert. I have them kind of similar, and I have them sandwiching Glasnow. So like, if there's any way you get both of those, I would give you a big thumbs up.
Yeah, Logan Webb, I mean, you hinted at this before. You've got him 9th in your starting pitcher rankings, and this is a big buying opportunity relative to the market for you or for anybody else who really believes in Logan Webb. He just needs to continue being a workhorse to sort of offset the lower K rate. If he gets close to 200 innings or above it, he got the 216 last year. You're going to get enough Ks where you're happy. Yeah, I mean, it's real good for the workload.
And then, even in the other seasons, like 30th and 24th, like that's a pretty good floor. I think that's what happens when you're able to put innings out there, is like you're at least going to give somebody like top 25-ish return. Yeah, I think that Logan, the other use case for me with Logan Webb, with both the Logans, is oh God, I went 3 or 4 hitters in a row. I got to have an ace. And I think that in that case, I don't think you want a YOLO. I don't think you want Glasnow as your ace. Well, I mean, Glasnow is not the good example here because you have to take him earlier. Who, like Peralta as your ace? As much as I like Freddy Peralta, if you're taking him as your ace, there's a lot of ways that can go south in terms of innings, right? I think I would rather, if I waited, just get a guy who I think is going to give me a lot of innings. Boom, got some innings. Step one. And then you can, in the middle of your draft, take some shots on guys that could be aces.
Yeah, you'll find plenty of ceiling in the middle rounds. We're going to talk about a lot of guys on day 2, part 2 of starting pitcher preview, where you're going to say, oh, yeah, that could work. That could work. That could work. So you can sort of make up for a hitter, even 5-hitter foundation. If you're in a 10 or a 12 team league and you see a lot of value with the bats, keep taking it, because I think there is a path for you to build a really good roster where maybe the middle 10 picks are almost all pitchers for you, or at least like half of them are pitchers. You're going to make up a lot of ground in a lot of leagues going that route. I think it's interesting that Framber Valdez seems like he's always beating his projection. Last year, the ground ball rate was still good, but it was a pretty big dip. It was 54.2% last year compared to 66.5 and 70.3 the previous 2 seasons. I just wonder with Framber, as he makes changes, is there any more room for strikeout rate increases? Because I see a lot of similar skills to Aaron Nola, but really a tighter range year over year for where the ratios have been. The peaks haven't been quite as good for Framber as Nola's peaks, but the valleys haven't been as bad as they've been for Nola either.
Yeah, you're right. The peaks actually pretty similar. He was 18th best starting pitcher last year. That was Nola's best in 2022. The valleys haven't been as bad. 24th in 2022, 42nd in 2021 for Framber. So top 50 pitcher all 3 years. Averages out to sort of a top 30 pitcher. Not going to give you the strikeouts, and that's almost always a category in any league. I think the advanced strikeout rate you saw from him last year, the sort of small improvement, was due to using the cutter, and that's why you saw the reduction in the ground balls. He used some cutters where he used to use sinkers, and so that's I think it was a good idea. I think you don't want to think too hard on what happened in the playoffs. I don't think that was like oh, he screwed up and he's actually not that good and he should go back to the way he used to be. I think in some, the cutter's been a good idea for him. And then I really struggled. I had him right next to Logan Webb for a while, but the projections aren't as nice to Framber. I guess he doesn't have that same park helping him out.
Yeah, I wonder how much the projections worry about a lefty at Minute Maid Park when you think about righties and the Crawford boxes and the possible. Yeah. So you get the platoon problem plus the park sort of amplifying that, but it hasn't. If it was going to bite him, it seems like it would have done it by now. I don't know. Right. and if it were, he seems like the kind of guy where if you go through this stretch and you get this new cutter approach, you start getting touched up for more homers, kind of go back away from it, at least at home, and you go back to being a ground ball machine, and you can kind of nip the home run problem pretty quickly. So I think he's got a lot of ways to still be good. And I think much like Logan Webb, because the strikeout rates aren't off the charts, he gets a little bit underrated in a lot of our circles. Max Fried, sandwich between Framber and Logan Webb ADP-wise, kind of looks like an avoid for you just based on where he's being drafted and where you've ranked him. I was pointing out in one of our group chats a couple of weeks ago, he's one of 7 pitchers with an ERA under 3. We're talking about pitchers who have 300 plus innings, really just narrowing this down to starters since the start of the 2021 season. So the ratios are fantastic. This is a guy that has a big payday looming at the end of the season. Some concerns about health. Curveball's great. You mentioned that kind of in passing earlier. It looked like the fastball velocity was fine last year, but that pitch was a lot less effective for him. Was there something going on with the ride or something in the characteristics of that pitch that just weren't quite right for Fried in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's funny is that Stuff Plus has never liked that fastball. So I guess the opinion of Stuff Plus is that it was just, this is what it was. But in terms of like velo and movement on the four seam. The velo was good, although it was trending down hardcore in 2022. So that's my sort of evidence that like maybe some injury was coming. And in terms of horizontal movement, it kind of is having less and less horizontal movement every year, becoming more of a kind of a cut fastball, cut rightish. So there are some subtle changes to the shape over time. I wouldn't say, by itself, that's enough. I would just say I'm a little bit maybe more worried about the injuries than other people.
Fair. Okay. Because I was going to say he's got a 4-pitch mix. He could pull the Hyunjin Ryu trick that we've talked about many, many times, where he just gets further and further away from the fastball. If that pitch isn't effective, it loses velo if it's not moving. But
Ryu
enough.
Ran location plus numbers in the 105s, regularly. That's a kind of Merrill Kelly type thing, right? Where a lot of pitches, and then Max Fried's location plus last year was 99. Wasn't a ton of innings last year, but that's enough for location plus to have any predictive quality. And I would just say it just doesn't look plus, it like probably average-ish command. So I just don't know what to hang my hat on and say this is why I like him better than the guys ahead of him. He just kept kind of falling. I suppose maybe I should have put him ahead of Eury Perez, whose innings are also concerned. But Eury Perez's stuff is just just bonkers.
It's stupid. You watch him, you're like, this guy's so good.
Yeah. So if they both get 100 innings, I kind of want Eury Perez's 100 innings, I'm guessing. He ended up right next to Zack Eflin, who that's how I think of Max Fried.
Yeah. And Eflin, I think we'll get to him in a little bit. I think Eflin is one of the pitchers that pops in the bat projections. I saw Derek Carty tweeting about that. So what's probably going to happen is that projection set's going to hit, and then Eflin's ADP is going to go up. So if you like Zack Eflin, I would say start drafting him now, because he's not in this tier. He's going a little bit later. He's going to probably creep up a little bit once all the formulas and the auction calculators and the dollar values everybody's running all have that extra projection set that like him, nudging him up the board. We kind of flew by Freddy Peralta. Just one other thing I want to throw out there: 165 and 2/3 innings last year. Really good sign. I'm just kind of curious to see if he responds to that and stays healthy, because it was a shoulder problem that slowed him down in 2022.
Pitch mix change too. He improved his slider over the second half, and he started using his changeup more. And this is the thing that I was just talking with Nick Pollock about is just this idea that are there certain fastballs that are harder to build around? And so you had Freddy Peralta has the most extension in the business and had this jumpy fastball, and he was Freddy Fastball forever. And is there some truth in that nickname where it just took him a while to figure out how to shape, because the release point on the fastball, if you're jumping out there, it's how do you jump out there and get all that extension, but then also be around the ball, or be in front of the ball for a curveball and stuff, just think about just really reaching out there and then trying to shape a slider, So I think that you end up having to do stuff where the grip does all the work, and you're just basically throwing the fastball over again, but sometimes in a, knuckle curve grip or whatever. Gilbert has had a similar story. Logan Gilbert is the major extension guy, and he's been trying to put the secondary pieces around it, but it was always about how good the fastball was for the first couple of years with Gilbert. So I see some similarities there. But it really made me happy to see him improve the slider, use it more, use the changeup more, and become more of a starting pitcher with a wider arsenal, because he has the stuff.
Yeah, the question, I think, back when he was fastball Freddy, when it was like an 80-20 mix, was, well, how many times can he turn the lineup over? How long is this going to work? I mean, there's the extension. There was also a deceptive element to his fastball as well. Maybe that diminishes over time. He's really gone a long way towards answering some of those questions, while also improving. His command and control are just better. He doesn't walk guys the way he used to. He still has bouts where he loses command, but it's not as frequent as it used to be. He seems a lot more settled on the mound than when he first broke into the league.
Best strikeout minus walk ratio in the second half among starting pitchers.
Yeah, it was a slow start for him last year, and he was able to sort of right the ship from July on too. So I think that was a pretty encouraging sign. Blake Snell, Kodai Senga, Grayson Rodriguez, also part of this group, all sort of clustered together. I wonder if Steamer's slight pessimistic projection on Blake Snell has lowered his ADP to this point. Certainly doesn't help that as of this recording on the 29th of January, he still doesn't have a team, so we don't know what park he's going to have for half of his starts. So what do you make of Blake Snell, at least at this point, as we wait to find out where he lands?
I think focusing on his, 5 innings per start is missing the fact that he actually went into the 6th and 7th for most of his starts last year. So people are fixated on the walk rate, but there's something that happened last year. He lost his slider in the first half. And so that's what he told me. And you can actually see it in the movement numbers for Blake Snell, that his slider was weird and different in the first half. And what that meant for him was, I'm going to throw my curve and my changeup more. And what that means traditionally from Blake Snell is more walks, because he doesn't command the changeup as well, and he doesn't command the curveball as well as he commands his fastball and slider. And so it worked out for him this year. The reason why I'm still hopeful that he can do it again is, well, he can throw the changeup less, and walk fewer people and get more strikeouts. And he's always had the huge strikeout rate. And when he's in there, he's provided value. You still get good numbers from Blake Snell at the end of the year. Second best starting pitcher last year. And then even 49th in 2022 with 128 innings. So you do have a little bit of that toggle where it's like, either I get the 50th best or I get a top 5 guy. That does make people nervous, but I see good news in his arsenal. It's it's one of those things where, how could it be bad news that he took his 3rd and 4th pitches last year and won a Cy Young on them?
Yeah, I mean, it's won 2 Cy Youngs, and people aren't that excited about him. You look at the splits, if you think, oh, maybe it was Petco. No, he had a 1.99 ERA on the road last year instead of a 2.52 at home. So it wasn't just that he crushed his home starts and was okay on the road. Workload concerns, we've said a few times, they are overblown. I mean, he went 6+ last year in 20 of his 32 starts. Spencer Strider did it 21 times. Corbin Burns did it 21 times. Kevin Gausman did it 21 times. There's not much to worry about here as far as how he's used in start. The issue continues to be injuries. How healthy is Blake Snell going to be? What does his health grade say from the Jeff Zimmerman scores that you have there? I forgot to look that up before the show.
C.
It's a C.
Same as Freddy Peralta. Although I did some hand projecting on the innings pitched, and I've got Blake Snell with like 3 more innings than Freddy Peralta. So that's super scientific.
Yes, I like hand projections.
That's just like 168. Ooh, but I gave the other guy 168. I think this guy's going to be 166.
I think I would love to see a league where you have. Well, the problem would be that if you had 12 teams in the league and you had 6 people working off of very rigorous computer-based projections and 6 people doing the hand, like by feel, like kind of looking at 3-year averages, looking at past stats, and just were writing them in, I think the numbers would still be more similar than you think. But you might find a certain pitcher type that the manual projections people miss on a little more often. And I wonder who would actually come out on top of a league.
I think it
like
would.
That.
I think your brain cannot stay away from recency bias. So I think the teams, that the players, the managers that were just doing the hand projecting would end up taking guys that were coming off of better seasons.
Yeah, I think that's probably what would happen too. Kodai Senga, a second half walk rate improvement last year, got down to 9.6%. Was that the true talent coming through after an initial adjustment period? We've talked a lot about players coming over, the Major League ball versus the baseball in foreign leagues. He has that sort of Blake Snell, Dylan Cease, like above average strikeout potential. It seems to come with the downside of some free passes, but he's also pitching in a park that's a very pitcher friendly environment. And one thing that really jumped off the page for me was looking at the third time through the order splits. Kodai Senga was excellent the third time through the order. And a lot of times when I look at guys that are in this SP2, SP3, this big bucket, one thing that makes someone pop and possibly jump up to SP1 status is being able to turn that lineup over effectively the third time, because they don't take on that damage when they get into the 5th and 6th inning.
Yeah. I had some difficulty ranking Kodai, and there's been a little bit of negative feedback saying that my ranking was too low. I've got him 30th. Maybe that is too low. We'll see. There's going to be a revision. But I'll say this. I think a lot depends on the cutter for Kodai Senga, and I don't think the cutter's actually that good. So, if you take that cutter away from him, or as a hitter, you target that cutter, he threw it 691 times last year. And, if you target that cutter, I think, it's a hard pitch that's, got significantly different movement than the fastball. I think you can maybe hard target that cutter. You got a 331 slugging on it, 379 slugging on the four seam. This is in a pitcher's park. So to some extent, I think that four seam and cutter is only an okay mix. Now, the Ghost Fork has been great, has had great results. Maybe the model is missing something on that. I get that. But I do think that the non-Ghost Fork pitches may be a little bit gettable.
Interesting. Yeah, I have found myself so far, just a couple early drafts, not being in a position to take Senga. But I also think I get spooked pretty easily by double-digit walk rates from starters. That's my easy. When Dylan Cease was good, I had no Dylan Cease. When Dylan Cease was bad, I had no Dylan Cease. So I miss out sometimes. I've missed out on Blake Snell a couple of times for this particular, skills flaw.
Location Plus agrees. He does not have a single pitch of even 98 Location Plus. The cutter has a 95.9, which that he needs to locate that pitch, right? Like that's a pitch he needs to use kind of like his fastball. His fastball 97.4 Location Plus. Like he doesn't actually locate that well. I will say that the one thing that I heard that kind of surprised me was I was talking to an executive and they were mentioning that there's a lot of pitchers that still get lots of swings on their splitters, even with low zone rates. And you can see that with Gausman or somebody like Kirby Yates. They'll have really low zone rates on it, but the batters still swing. And so there's you kind of want to be like, why are you swinging at the Ghost Fork? And I guess it just must come out just like a fastball in terms of his arm movement or something. There's enough of a velo gap where you might say, well, can't you see that early velo gap? But maybe the Ghost Fork is so good that it doesn't matter this yammering I'm doing about his cutter and his four seam.
Maybe it doesn't matter, but it seems important because you still have other quality options that go in this range. So I'd rather, based on everything you said today and based on what I thought previously, I'd rather have Gilbert than Senga anyway. And it's nice that you get Gilbert on the board as a toss-up most of the time. Grayson Rodriguez, I think, is really interesting. He's the last one for us to talk about in this group. Everything really clicked for him in the second half, and all but one of his last 10 starts, he went at least 5 innings, which I think really eased some of the concerns about his workloads relative to how the Orioles managed him in the minor leagues. It was all about trying to get him into the big leagues, keep him healthy, and just make sure that he could ascend to be the ace of their rotation. That's been the long-term plan there. It was a bumpy ride the first half, but everything really did seem to fall in place, and it was 163 and a third innings last season for Grayson Rodriguez. That bodes really well for his chances of having just a completely unfettered path to as many innings as he can handle in 2024.
Yeah, I think there was a bump in the road that was completely avoidable. If you've got an image we got here. So this is a very simple Grayson Rodriguez's StatCast pitch mix. And what you'll see early on is this weird brown line that just disappears after he comes back from the minors. And that's his cutter, which Stuff Plus said was his worst pitch. And he was throwing it 15% of the time to lefties before he went down. This is he threw 706 cutters this is Kodai Senga. He threw 144 cutters last year. Grayson Rodriguez did 375 batting average, 833 slugging.
That didn't work.
That didn't work. And it's as simple as that. Like afterwards, he came back up. He was fastball changeup mostly with some curveballs to lefties, and he was much better. I think he just trusted his fastball, and he has a really great fastball. So that's, I think, part of why the results were so much better in the second half. And what I see when I look at Grayson Rodriguez is a guy who has a full mix, good command. There's I don't know what's missing. I think he's about to become an ace in the sort of traditional value of the word.
There's a really fun cluster of 3 pitchers in your rankings right now. You've got Bobby Miller at 19, Grayson Rodriguez at 20, and Eury Pérez at 22. And this is where they all tend to get drafted too. You start tier 4 just after pick 75. Eury Pérez is right there. Bobby Miller is right there. Jesús Luzardo's right there. Kyle Bradish, who's 21st in your rankings, also goes right there. And this tier extends to include Zack Eflin, Joe Ryan, Cole Reagans, and Justin Steele. So
I love this tier, dude. Like, this is such a beautiful place to get a second starting pitcher, I think, because if you think about Eury Pérez, Bobby Miller, Kyle Bradish, and Grayson Rodriguez, they all have shown us flashes of brilliance, have shown us stretches where they really, really were great. They all are going to be in their rotations from day one. There isn't like they have to win it. Save Pérez, they've had really good innings and health, outcomes recently and through the minors. And Pérez's aren't super bad. It's not. I just want to say that he's more like maybe a B or a C. Whereas I'd pretty much give A's to Grayson Rodriguez and Bobby Miller, and Kyle Bradish. So it's just a really great group of pitchers that I don't think they're going to win a Cy Young this year, but a lot of times you sort of win the Cy Young in the future by having sort of this 120, 130 inning. It's like my theory about the Oscars. You have to do, what was the Ryan Gosling one where he's like a teacher and the heroine and Half Nelson or whatever? You have to do Half Nelson to win the Oscar later. You're not going to win it for Half Nelson. You should have, but you're going to win it for something else later. I'm not saying that voters are bad and all that stuff. I'm just saying that these are the guys who are going to lay the foundation for future Cy Young seasons this year. And that's how excited I am about them. I like all of them. Bradish got Cy Young votes last year.
Deservedly so. I think what's interesting here, Pérez threw 128 innings last year between AAA and Miami. They pushed him a little harder than I think we would have expected. We talked about him when he got called up on Project Prospect, and we just wondered how much they'd use the kid gloves. I think it's weird that projections so far, at least the public-facing stuff over at Fangraphs, has a similar number of innings for him. I don't know why you wouldn't be pushing him at least to the 160 range. Like, that seems reasonable given past concerns about injury. But he was near 30% called strike and whiff percentage. There's potential for more Ks. He's probably not going to have a 25.4% ground ball rate. That was pretty extreme based on what we saw from him in his minor league profile. So there's seemingly nowhere to go but up for Eury Pérez.
Bobby Miller and the Dodgers, they kind of run a de facto 6-man rotation. They don't call it as such. So I think that Miller might top out at 150 innings along with Pérez. But Grayson Rodriguez and Bradish should be able to get to 180. Right. So if you're a little bit more on the innings concerned side, then take the Orioles. But those other two, I think they have the capability of sort of putting together that type of season where, it was only 140, 150 innings, but they ended up still in the top 10.
Where do we get more Ks from Bobby Miller? Stuff pops off the charts. Seen the numbers, 23.6% K rate, though, as a rookie. It's pretty low relative to the arsenal he brings to the table. Do we get a full jump in 2024?
There's some weird usage stuff. I hate to, I don't want to sit here and be like, I know better than Mark Pryor. So I'm not going to say that. But if you just look at how Bobby Miller uses his fastball, he throws it low and it's a 2-plane fastball. He doesn't like to throw it. Let me see if it's righties here. I need to look at righties. He doesn't ever throw it high and tight to righties, so righties can always assume that they're going to get this fastball away from them. He doesn't throw it even low and tight. So there's certain predictability to how he's being used. Maybe that's the Dodgers being like, he can't command it in. If we have him throw it in, he's just going to hit a bunch of guys, right? Maybe that's all it is. There's some usage stuff that I think could change. I'm also just looking at his minor league numbers and being like, I don't know, man. This guy struck out 30% of the batters in the minor leagues that he saw. Like, I don't think he's just going to come up and strike out 22, 23%, especially with that stuff. So I'm just assuming that he's going to strike out more. So no, most of the projection systems have him striking out sort of 22 to 23. And I wanted to get mine up here. Where is it? Got Bobby Miller 19. We've got a projected 26.6. So that's what I believe in. I believe in a large step forward in strikeouts this year for Bob Miller.
Yeah, and it could be 2 or 3 years before he gets to the actual strikeout peak, potentially, depending on the flaws he's working through. But it's a nice jump if he ends up getting into that mid 26 range here in 2024. Jesus Luzardo in this cluster. You always wonder, like, why did the A's give up on him? It's second year in a row where he had a K- BB percentage over 20%. Still some lingering durability questions here, but he's one of those guys who's trying to improve that health grade. You look at Eury Pérez kind of working with him as a 1-2, gives the Marlins a really nice combo atop the rotation, even with Sandy Alcantara recovering from Tommy John surgery.
Is
this Luzardo as good as it gets for Luzardo?
Yeah, I've got him a little bit lower. And one of the reasons why was I was looking at Jesus Luzardo's disastrous 2021 when Oakland did give up on him. And I was trying to be like, okay, so what changed in 2022 and 2023 from that year? And I'm looking at his breaking ball movement. I'm looking at his usage. He's using his sinker a little bit less and focusing on the four seam. There's a tiny bit of movement difference in the slider, but I would say the very biggest difference between who he is now and who he was in 2021 is 1 mile an hour of fastball velocity. Like I kind of think that's what it is. And so when you discover something like that, you're like, oh, well, what happens when he loses the 1 mile an hour? So that I want to do more research on this. And if anybody's listening, looking for a research project, I definitely think there are types of fastballs that can lose, that if they lose a little bit of velo, lose a lot in effectiveness. I would call them fragile fastballs. And to me, Jesus Luzardo has a fragile fastball. He's at 90th percentile fastball velocity among his peers. What happens when he's not that?
Yeah, 96.7 last year on the four-seamer. Just jumps off the page, a full tick, as you said, above what he did 2 years ago during his final season in Oakland. So I guess the other question would be, like, he's got the slider and changeup. I wonder if there's anything else he could mix into that arsenal if you were to lose something on the four-seamer, just to keep it all together, right? You do it a slightly different way.
But he hasn't shown the propensity to be like a really great spinner, You could, like guys who are really good spinners at this point already have their second breaking ball and they're working on the third. Like, he's not that guy. Like, so I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, he can add a cutter. I don't know. Could he?
Yeah. You mentioned Kyle Bradish, velo bump last year. Really nice 4-pitch mix, really pitcher-friendly park. Everything just seemed like it clicked. And a lot of times what you see is the guy that had the first season in the big leagues wasn't very good. Big breakout the following year. Projections just split the difference. It's where they usually go. It's kind of just how the projections work. So it spits out like a high 3s ERA and a low 120s whip. And I just keep looking at Bradish and thinking there's no reason why he can't beat the projections, even if you don't want to write him in for a repeat of last year. I fully understand that. Beating the projections would probably make him a little undervalued where he's been going.
Yeah, our projections actually think he has more strikeout rate upside left. We've got him for 25.3%, which is higher than what he had last year and about 3 percentage points higher than the consensus in terms of strikeout rate. I don't know. Maybe part of this is because his second half stuff plus was better and his second half strikeout rate was better. He went from a 22.9 in the first half to a 27.3 in the second half. And if we're using second half stuff plus, then we're going to capture that. But that's another way of saying is the stuff that he did, the things that he changed, were supported under the hood. You know, in terms of a 27% strikeout rate and a 6% walk rate, that's elite.
Yeah, that's like Gausman numbers. Like that's
so I tend to believe that we could see a 26% strikeout rate from him next year. If we see a 26% strikeout rate, even those traditional projections, I think would cut 2-3 decimal points off of that ERA.
Still within this group, and again, kind of squeezing these guys in before the top 100 overall. We're looking at Zack Eflin, Joe Ryan, Cole Reagans, and Justin Steele as the bottom part of this group. We talked about it when the Rays signed Zack Eflin, that they could do a lot of the things they usually do, make some tweaks, and he could be a lot more effective. The biggest thing for me is that he stayed healthy. Like I thought, sure, I trust the Rays. I always kind of trust the Rays when they seek out a pitcher and give them a multi-year deal in free agency, which they don't even do that very often. It's more just they bring somebody in. They usually have a reason for it. First time in his career with a CSW above 30. Got the K bump without losing the excellent walk rate. I think the long-term concerns with him health-wise with his knees, 177 and 2/3 innings last year. It was a career high for him, and it was at least 70 more than what he'd done in each of the previous 2 seasons in Philadelphia. So are you buying the adjustments, and where does the health grade have to fall on Zack Eflin given the past issues?
Yeah, we got a C on him. Basically, last year was what he did in 21 and 22 combined. I see him as a better than Merrill Kelly, but a similar thing where he's got the wide arsenal, good command. I don't think that. I guess his curve is probably his out pitch or whatever, but it's I don't see like Kyle Bradish's slider is one of the top 5 sliders in the big leagues. So. He has an out pitch and he figured out the stuff around it. Eflin is more of a wide arsenal command. And I'm just worried that one of the things that happens is command is not a sticky season to season. And when you think about knees, you're like, oh, what if his knee is not hurt so much that he needs to be on the IL, but it's bothering him, and then because his knee is bothering him, he doesn't quite block the same and his release point shifts just an inch or something and the command isn't quite there. Then I think that could be difficult for him, and that could explain some of the ERAs he's had in the past, which haven't been that great. So I'm not a high man on him. I probably won't end up with him, but he is in a soft part of the rankings, which I've noticed is this sort of 20 to 30. Some people are busy getting closers and bats, especially if they got 2 pitchers ahead of this.
Yeah.
So if you just got 1 pitcher and then you went back to bats and then you come back into this tier, there's a chance that you could jump in here and get Eflin and pair him with somebody with a little bit more upside, like a Perez or something. Like try to come back. An Eflin Perez combo is kind of an interesting one. You may not get many innings though.
You wonder with the velo on Eflin, not a lot of room to go down in that regard, even though it's not all about the fastball. It's in the danger zone in that facet. And you look at Joe Ryan, who goes in this group. Ryan, I think it's even more important for him because he doesn't have as many ways to get a guy out as Eflin does. And we've talked about him before as having the unusual release that makes that pitch so effective. The home run issue just went through the roof, and you've got him quite a bit lower than market. So it looks like you will be without Joe Ryan in most of your leagues, if not all of your leagues this season.
Yeah. When I try to tell myself a story about why I like Joe Ryan and I'm going to take him is that he's fiddling with his breaking balls and he hasn't quite landed on one. And Joe Ryan is actually in our discussion of guy with a great, interesting fastball, struggling to find secondaries to pair with it. Mm-hmm. And he threw the splitter a bunch and it gave up a 450, 470 slugging last year. And he started throwing a sweeper and then he stopped throwing the sweeper, started throwing a gyro. I'm just hoping that he finds the right combination of those secondaries. And it has to be fewer splitters and maybe more gyros. Maybe he goes the 2 breaking ball approach and the splitter is just something that comes up every once in a while. But if you have a really good fastball with deception, with ride that has good results and you can throw it high in the zone and get the whiffs that he does, I think it's a pretty good foundation. So high whiffs, high homer rate is the base. The hope is he figures out those secondary pitches and can avoid the homers, because he throws so many high fastballs that people are just, they just sit high, and they're just trying to hit him out of the park.
Yeah. And with the winter to try and work on those secondaries, you never know. I think he'd be someone you'd want to watch closely in spring training, see if he's got some new stuff he's working with, because that could change a lot
and
for
to
Joe
see
Ryan.
How many breaking balls he throws. Like if he can, if he goes to the more heavy breaking ball idea, then I think it could sort of click. We know he's got this ability to strike people out. That's always a really good place to start.
How about one of the best breakout stories of last season? Cole Reagans goes in this group. I know Nick Pollock had a chance to interview him during PitchCon. I did not get a chance to watch the interview, but I know you can watch all the PitchCon presentations, I believe, on YouTube. What do you make of Reagans and what he was able to do once he was given a rotation spot with the Royals last year? I think you've said previously, don't give the Royals credit because there was already some stuff happening before he got to Kansas City, but it was impressive. I mean, the stuff looks really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, you should give a lot of love to Tread, where he worked, and Tyler Zombro is his trainer. And there's I did a piece where I've just basically interviewed the player and the trainer about how they got to where they got. But the most impressive thing that they managed to do is just unlock all that old velo that Reagans had before. He had 2 Tommy Johns, and he had one Tommy John, and that didn't really take. So it was like kind of a revision. It was like a second one that he never really got in the mound afterwards. And Zombro said that he was kind of, I'm not speaking like the way a pitching coach would. I'm sort of paraphrasing him for us. But basically, he was like babying himself during the rehab process. Sometimes you're throwing on flat ground. You're not even throwing on the mound. There's certain things that your body does during rehab that you kind of need to break out of at some point, because you want them to go on the mound and throw it as hard as they can, and in rehab, you're kind of like, okay, we're bringing this back. Let's get the command back. Let's bump the velo a little bit. You're kind of hushed tones. You don't want it to break again, but Reagans got out there in 2023 and was like, I'm going to let it eat. And he got out there early on, was 95s, and then it was 96s. And then the end of the season was 97. And just the shape of that season, the way that his velo kept going up and up and up, made me feel, I feel very good about it. And then there's also just a ongoing story of him figuring out his secondaries. He has a very good breaking ball, and he wanted to add, I think it's a curve, and he wanted to add a gyro slider so that lefties, he could get lefties out. And he was having as a lefty, it's a little bit surprising, but he was having, because he has a really good changeup, he was finding that he couldn't get lefties to swing and miss. And once he added this new slider, he was able to kind of put the whole package together. So I don't know, like I'm telling you, man, that I believe in him, and yet, like, I just, like, when you have these big breakouts and it's somebody that you liked and then you picked up and you told everyone to pick up and you feel proud of him, then it's just weird that you come in the next year and you're like low man on him. But I tried to just be reasonable and looked at the projections. He had a 4.2 projection with stuff plus in there. I pushed him higher than that. Like, he's among guys. He's higher than Luzardo, who has a 3.98 projection from us. But I couldn't push him, above Max Fried or Zach Eflin or, into Eury Perez territory. And he's kind of going up there.
Yeah, when you look at what Reagans was able to do, the limited run in the big leagues, just limiting everywhere, I think makes the projection even harder to put together. Seeing ATC out there a little more optimistic than Steamer probably helps some folks. 3.85 for the ERA, 1.28 for the WHIP. In this range, it's fine if that's what he does. I think because he was better than that last year, because he did it with a K rate above 30%. In the second half, he has a 21.7% K minus BB percentage. That's 11th among qualified pitchers. So that's really good. I like him where he's going. I don't have him anywhere yet. I will have him somewhere before draft season is over, almost certainly. And I think it's easy to look at this arsenal and say, yeah, that plays. It's just elevated injury risk is really one thing that holds him back. But if we were saying, where could he go? Like, what's the best case scenario for him when we're talking 2025 starting pitcher preview. What tier is he likely to be in? I mean, tier 2 is possible. I think he could get up to that range.
Why wouldn't he be able to get to where Eury Perez is now? Or why wouldn't he be able to get where Kyle Bradish is now?
Or even where Skubal is. Like, why? Like, is that really out of bounds for him? Skubal's like the 12th starting pitcher off the board.
Yeah, and I think if he demonstrated health, like we were talking about, I have Pablo López 12. And, there's a guy who had, a similar health grade. They both have C's. They have bad health in their past. But let's say Cole Reagans has, 2023 on his resume and then comes out this year and throws 160 innings, even with maybe the same health grade, we might start to say, no, well, maybe he's turned the corner. Maybe he's found the good healthy mechanics. And, and if he has results again like he did, he could jump all the way up to top 15, I think.
Last one of the group, and probably the last one we're actually going to talk about today, because we're kind of coming up on a natural break for the episode. Justin Steele, you've got him inside your top 30, so he's a little bit underpriced, I think, where he's going right now. Very close to fair market value. We saw an improved walk rate last season. He got down to 5%, easily the best of the 3 seasons we've seen in the big leagues, almost cut it in half compared to where he was in 2022. K rate still in the mid-20 range. We saw a few more Ks in the second half, so maybe that's a sign of things to come. It's really just a heavy fastball slider combo, though. Do you think there's anything else there that could show up in Justin Steele's arsenal that would give him a different look for hitters?
Steele actually benefited from the Stuff Plus update. One of the things that we put in the Stuff Plus update, as I mentioned, was platoon splits as a lefty with his mix, 2-pitch mix. I guess there's something that the model said it liked about that. It got him to above average Stuff Plus. That lines up, I think, a little bit better with the strikeout rates and what he's done. But I confess to be a little bit nervous about a 2-pitch pitcher still. And this is a 2-pitch pitcher who averaged 91.8 for the season, or 92, depending on where you're looking. So it's Spencer Strider is a 2-pitch pitcher. He averages 97. Mm-hmm. So I kind of do want to hear a little bit in the spring from Steele about a curveball or a changeup or something, because it's such a weird combo where he basically throws a cutter as his regular pitch and a slider as the second one, a little bit Kyle Bradish-esque. But if you look at what Kyle Bradish did, was he started throwing the sinker, he mixed in the curveball, he made his arsenal wider. So I do want that from him, because we did see at the end of the season a 4.9 ERA from Steele in September. I'm not saying that he's like his goose is cooked, but 2.5 in the first ERA in the first half, 3.5 in the second. There's maybe some the league kind of, okay, you got 2 pitches. We're starting to formulate a game plan. Yes, your pitches look weird, but as we see them more, we have better chances to do something with him.
He's one of those guys. There's a few pitchers like this. You watch him and you wonder why he doesn't get hit more. But at the same time, the results are impressive enough over really a 2-year stretch now where you can't deny it. Like, he's got something that works. And I'd love to see a third pitch from Justin Steele if I was going to start jumping in here. I just think Reagans versus Steele is a toss-up. It's so hard to talk yourself into Steele when you care about velocity, when you care about
BB,
how filthy these things are. I mean, because this is the other thing you put together for today's show. You've got a Stuff Plus leaderboard for sliders. Cole Reagans, 3rd best slider last year by
right
Stuff
behind
Plus.
Kyle Bradish. It's like who I was just talking about. If you start with something elite like that, then you just have a better outcomes. And I don't know why Justin Verlander is not in this ADP tier. I have him
age.
Age, but still got a slider. So I've got Justin Verlander in that tier, and I've got Cole Reagans ahead of Steele.
So there's a handful of names you'll see on the screen that are definitely going to come
No, I
up.
don't. I have Steele ahead of Reagans. Okay, that might change in the update. All right, we got a couple changes that are happening in front of you.
It's fun. It's fun to find those things.
Do you know how long I stared at these mofos? And how many would I rather this guy or this guy? How many times I texted you blah 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 or blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah.
And like half the times I'm like, sorry, got Braden right now. Got to look later, and then fell asleep. And I was not as helpful as I would have been most of the years of my life, but I tried to offer a little bit of feedback when I could. If you'd like to see the rankings again, theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Get a subscription, $2 a month for the first year. The new format is amazing. The blurbs that Eno mentioned earlier adds a lot of context to the rankings. It's an evolving process. We're going to be all over the rankings throughout this season. We've talked a lot about hitters. We're going to have some hitter rankings at some point. I got to get moving on the back end to get some stuff going for that, but that is in the cards, something we'd like to put out there this year as well. And this is just day one of Pitcher Week, as we said up top. We have 2 more starting pitcher episodes to go. We got a relief pitcher episode and inevitably a Q&A mailbag style pitching episode that will likely happen sometime next week or the week after that. So you can find us on Twitter. Eno is at Enosaris. I'm at Derek from Ripert. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. Send us an email, ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. If you got questions for a future episode, we'd love that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the like button if you're watching this video. If you made it to the end, you're awesome. And we'll see you again tomorrow.
Thanks for listening.